Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all who is joining us today. I'm Dr. Nargiza Ludgate and one of the leads of the local capacity development cross-cutting team within the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Livestock Systems at the University of Florida. We are happy to continue our live webinar series funded by the Innovation Lab for Livestock Systems in collaboration with the UF Libraries, George S. Mathers Library. These series are focused on maximizing your research impact, that is increasing your scholarly profile and visibility in the digital age. Today's webinar is on ORCID and Friends. ORCID stands for Open Researcher and Contributor ID and allows registered users to maintain a digital curriculum that shows all your scholarly contribution to science. Today's webinar will involve some hands-on. Towards the end of this webinar, we will provide step-by-step guidance, how to register, set up your profile, and utilize ORCID. Next slide, please. Okay, no, please stop there. The webinars are led by Dr. Terry Kidd-Self, who is the Translational Research and Impact Librarian at the University of Library. Dr. Selfie is an experienced clinical investigator with specific expertise in the planning and execution of clinical trials involving mind-body therapies for chronic conditions related to aging and stress. She received a Doctor of Chiropractic degree from Palmer College of Chiropractic, a PhD in educational research from the University of Virginia, as well as completed a National Institute of Health funded postdoctoral fellowship in clinical research at the University of Virginia Center for the Study of Complementary and Alternative Therapies. Now, before I turn over to Dr. Self, I'd like to go over some housekeeping. We request all participants to please mute your microphones and keep them mute throughout this webinar. Please type your name and institution in email chat. Recordings and PowerPoint slides of these and future webinars will be posted on the Livestock Systems Innovation Lab website, and we will post a link in chat. Please use chat for questions and comments. Now, for our French-speaking colleagues, we translated the PowerPoint slides into French. You're welcome to download them and use them to follow Dr. Selfie on Zoom. Now I turn over to Dr. Self.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And as stated, today's session will be focused on the ORCID ID. We're going to talk about what it is and why it's useful. And to that end, we'll also look at some of the systems that it works well with, including some databases that we talked about in the previous webinar. And what I'm going to do today is I'll run through all of the slides, just like presenting the content. And that way, if there are people that you're just here to get the information and you want to use the slide deck later on your own time to actually create your ORCID ID and follow along with the slides, you'll be free to go after we've gone through all of the content. For those of you who actually want to make use of the time now to try to set up your ORCID while there's somebody here to help walk you through it and address any questions that might come up, then at the end, we'll go back to the step-by-step slides and we'll proceed through those more slowly so that you can follow along and actually get something accomplished during the webinar if that's the way you want to approach it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the video at this point and then proceed through the content. So what is an ORCID ID? It's a unique identifier for researchers. This is if you have a name that isn't unique, using this 16-digit ID number helps you make sure that your publications are credited to you and not someone else who shares your name. Also, if you have publications that you used a different version of your name, like with or without a hyphen in your name, or that used your initials versus your full name, searching by the ORCID ID can help you capture those records as well. And along those lines, just make sure whenever you submit a manuscript to a journal for publication that you include your ORCID ID. So having the ORCID can help you manage your publications. If you've got a common name, using the ORCID ID number can help you retrieve your articles when you're searching databases like Scopus or Dimensions. And unlike the citation databases that we talked about in the last webinar, like Scopus and Dimensions, those databases only allow you to add records from publications that they cover, whereas ORCID allows you to add records from multiple sources. And what's nice is you can set up your account so that trusted parties can update your record directly. That saves you from having to do some manual data entry. Also be aware that some journals are now requiring an ORCID ID when you submit a manuscript for publication. And similarly, some funders are also now requiring an ORCID ID. One example being the National Institutes of Health. They're requiring it for some of their awards now, and others will likely follow. Here's an example of an ORCID record. And this is what the public sees if they search your name on the ORCID site. In this example, the researcher has 7 publications that are viewable in the public view. And here's what someone sees when they're logged into their own record. So not only does ORCID keep track of the publications, like you saw in the previous slide where they had works listed, you can also include information on your employment, education, memberships, funding that you have, as well as the publications. And ORCID lets you choose what information you want to include and what parts of your record you want the public to be able to see. So in this example, I chose not to even enter any information on employment or education. I included only one grant. But you can see by this little red lock icon next to that grant, I have that set so only I can see that. That will not be viewable in the public version. And then under my works, I have 37 items that I can see in the owner's view. I have set all of them so that everyone can see them, with the exception of one article that I've got set to private. And then from this owner's view, you can then preview what the public will see by clicking this link. And here you're seeing the preview, and you'll notice of those 37 works that I could see, the public only sees the 36 that I set for everyone to see. So just because you put it in your ORCID record doesn't mean you have to share it with everyone. You can use the ORCID record to track things for your own purposes without sharing with the public. And to get an ORCID ID, it's fairly simple. You can set up a free account in only very few minutes. And this, you'll actually have the opportunity to do this at the very end of the presentation if you want to stick around and do that. We'll go through the step-by-step slides again more slowly so that you can follow along. And once you have an account, which some of you may already have an ORCID, you can set some different things in the account settings once you're signed in. So you've got various account settings that you can edit, and you can see which organizations you've got set as trusted parties that have the ability to update your record. And this is just an example of some of the trusted organizations that you can opt to let update your record. You can see there are some publishers. For example, Marianne Liebert is a publisher. There are also some of the manuscript submission systems like Editorial Manager, the Hindawi manuscript tracking system, and also Dimensions, which is the database that we talked about last webinar and will be looking at again today, because it interacts very nicely with ORCID. And again, the reason to do this, why you would want to accept someone as a trusted organization, is they tend to get the records updated quickly, and it saves you from doing some manual entry. To make the most of this benefit, I suggest making Crossref and Dimensions trusted parties, along with any of the journals that you publish in. Make sure that those publishers are accepted as trusted parties. And then when you submit a manuscript to a journal, include the ORCID ID. That way, if it is accepted for publication, the article information can then just be added to your ORCID profile without you having to do anything. And here's an example of an article that was published on September 23rd, 2021. And you can see Crossref added the record for me, and it happened right away. It was the same day that the publication went out. And this could have taken me weeks or even months to get around to updating my list of publications on my own. So this was much more timely by having them set as a trusted party. And also in account settings, you can set it up to receive email notifications whenever the record is changed. So if you set it to immediately, whenever somebody like Crossref adds an item to your record, you'll get an email right away letting you know that happened. And just an example of that same article, and you can see it was published on September 23rd. It was added to ORCID September 23rd, and I got the email from ORCID September 23rd. So this was actually how I found out that this article had finally been published. And I let my co-authors know. They weren't aware of it either. So it was actually the ORCID notification that let me know, ooh, that article that we've been waiting to come out is now out. So a couple other things you can do in account settings is you can set your preferred language for the email notifications, as well as how the ORCID displays on your screen. And you can choose kind of the global default settings for who can see your information. And again, it's everyone can see everything you enter, only trusted parties can see everything you enter, or only you can see everything you enter. And again, this is just the global setting. As you saw previously, for every item, you can go in and modify item by item. So having an ORCID ID comes in handy when you're using other databases as well. In this example, this is Web of Science. And if you're searching for your articles in Web of Science and you search by your name and you're pulling up a bunch of irrelevant hits, you might do better if you search by author identifiers and use your ORCID ID. Same thing for Scopus Preview. Again, you have the option of searching by name, but you've also got the ORCID search function. And in both of these cases, you're gonna, when you enter your 16-digit number, you want to include the hyphens. And the final example I'm going to show you is in Dimensions. This one, unlike the previous two, where you had an actual field where you could enter the ID number. So here, Web of Science knows you're searching by an author identifier. Scopus knows you're searching specifically by the ORCID ID. Dimensions, in this free version, this is just a free text search. So when you enter the number, it's pulling articles that have parts of that number. It doesn't know it's specifically searching for an ORCID ID. So what you do in this case, enter the ORCID, and you see I pull up like 73,000 publications. Not helpful here, but what you do is then go into the researcher drop down on the left. If you've got a lot of publications, your name might appear. If you have fewer publications, you just hit a little more button, and then you can type in part of your name. Here I just typed in my last name, and then my name appears as one of the additional options. You hit limit 2. And now it's searching for my ORCID ID and my name, and it's now at 40 publications. So that's how you make use of your ORCID ID to find your articles in Dimensions. And just to point out, because I searched by the ORCID ID, it's pulling up different versions of my name that just a simple name search may not have retrieved. So in this example, it's getting my full name, first, middle, and last. It's also picking up, here's an article where my middle name was not included, just my first and last name. It retrieved that article, as well as articles where just my first initials were included. And if you recall from the previous webinar, the reason you might want to be searching for your articles in some of these databases is because you might be looking for some specific metrics that you're wanting to capture. So if you wanted your field citation ratio or the relative citation ratio from Dimensions from your list, you see here, you just hover over citations and it's showing you those metrics. And if you recall, Dimensions also has alt metrics, which were the things like news coverage and social media attention. But for Dimensions, even if you're not interested in the metrics, one real benefit for the ORCID in Dimensions is if you have a Dimensions account, which is free, and I'll show you how to, we'll look at setting one of those up in this session as well. You set up a free account, you do the search. I'm looking at my 40 publications, but here I'm logged in. So not only am I seeing the citation information, I also see this Add to ORCID button, or this is in your ORCID record already. So you can pull up your articles and just with one click, add any of your publications to your ORCID. So it's a quick way to populate your ORCID account. And if there's an item you want to add, you may be prompted to sign in to your ORCID account and authorize the update. That I had to do that in the past, but recently I've not had to do that, but I'm not sure if that's because I've had an ORCID account for quite a while. I've had my Dimensions account for a while, and I have linked them for a while. So just giving you notice that the first time you do this, you may be asked to sign in to ORCID to activate it. And then once you add items through your Dimensions account, if you've got the email notifications set up, you'll get an email from ORCID saying, hey, Dimensions made this change to your ORCID record. So I'm going to quickly go through these step-by-step instructions. Again, this is just for the people who just want the information and then they want to do it on their own time. Don't try to follow along with this right now. At the end of the session, we will go back to these slides and I'll step through them slowly. This is just kind of a preview of coming attractions, if you will. So you would go to the orcid.org site, hit the register button. Notice you can choose your preferred language here. And then you'll get something that looks like this, giving you the option to sign in, or in your case, you don't have an ORCID ID yet, register now. So you click that link and you'll get step 1 of the form, which is basically you enter your name and email address. And once you do that, you might get a pop-up if there are similar names already in the ORCID registry. You'll get something like this asking, are any of these you? In which case you've already got an ORCID and you would just sign in. But we're assuming you don't have an ORCID and you need to register. So you would continue with registration. And then they require a password. The notification settings, you do not have to tick this box. You automatically will have notification settings. This is just asking if you want quarterly emails about new ORCID features and tips. If you do want that, tick that box. If you don't, just go on to next. And they let you set your default visibility settings, as you've already seen. Everyone, trusted organizations, or only me. These are the global defaults. And then you will need to agree to their terms of use. You might have to tell them you're not a robot, and then register. So that's as simple as getting an ORCID ID is. The other thing is if you want to register for the Dimensions account, this is the URL, and you'll have something that looks like this with a register button up at the top. One note, once you've got your ORCID ID and you have your Dimensions account and you're signed in, if you're not seeing those add to ORCID buttons when you look at your records, go into your account, select the ORCID information, and make sure that you've connected Dimensions to your ORCID record. And then once that is done, you should be able to see those add to ORCID buttons. So that's going to be it for the content. Basically, what is the ORCID ID? How can it be useful? And how do you get one? And then the little bonus material on connecting it with your Dimensions account for the one-click additions. Also in the slide deck, I've got the couple of slides about the upcoming webinars in the series. And now, Nargiza, if you have any final words for the people who just wanted the content.
Okay, thank you very much, Terry. I have an ORCID account, but every time I learn something new. I think we can take a few questions before we go into step by step, perhaps. So we have about 10 minutes to take the questions. If you have questions, please post them on the chat. If you're having trouble, you can unmute and ask the question. That's okay. While we're waiting for the post of the questions, I would like to thank our presenter, Dr. Terry Keith-Self, for this engaging presentation and making herself available to walk you through the step-by-step process to set up ORCID account and tie that to Dimensions. I also would like to thank our listeners. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to see you in future webinars. Please share the recording of this webinar and the previous webinars and the future webinars with your colleagues, students, and encourage them to join. Our next webinar is on April 29th, and it will be on Publish, Don't Perish. It will be at the same time at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I would like to thank our tech team, the Innovation Labs Communications Manager, Jim Harper, and the member of my team from the Local Capacity Development, Anna Ugalde-Brains. I still do not see any questions, so I propose we offer this slot for step-by-step account setup, if that's okay with you, Terry.
Yep, perfect. So as I say, if you just wanted the content and you're going to try this on your own time using the slide deck, thanks for joining us. I hope you got something out of it. And I hope you will join us for future webinars. For those of you who want to try this live, we're going to do the step-by-step at this point. And have we already put the URLs in the chat? Has somebody already done that, or should I do that now?
We're doing that.
Okay.
I posted the links to Dimensions and to ORCID.
Yeah, so for those of you playing along, the first link you want is that orchid.org link. And you should be seeing something that looks like this. Select your language of choice. Mine is English. If yours is something different, your screen will look different than the slides. But you're going to hit the register.
Dr. Self?
Yes.
We have a question in the chat. It says, besides Dimensions, is there any other database such as Google Scholar allowing to directly import publications into a ORCID account?
Not to my knowledge. Last I checked, Google Scholar was not doing it. And neither were some of the paid databases like Web of Science and Scopus. They didn't have that capability either.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm moving on to the next slide. Assuming you did register, you want the register now if you don't already have an ORCID ID. So we're registering now. And from the register now, you get a form to start filling out. Very basic, first name, last name, a primary email, which you confirm. That's the minimum required information. I do know in the past, they required that your email be like an institutional email or an organizational email, as opposed to like a Gmail account. I think there's been talk about changing that, but I don't know that that has happened. So your safest bet is to use, if you have an institutional or organizational email address. For example, I use my ufl.edu email address for my ORCID.
Terry, we
Yes.
have raised a hand from Sanon. Sanon, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask a question, please do. Sanon, if you would like to ask a question, please unmute yourself and ask. If not, please post your question in the chat. Okay, sorry, Terry. Perhaps you may continue.
Okay. So we'll go on to the next slide. And as I mentioned, if you've got a name that is shared by others, you can look to see if you already have an ORCID ID. Again, we are assuming you do not, and you want to register. That being the case, you would continue with registration. The next step in registration is where you set up your password, and they tell you what is required of that password. Needs to have at least 8 characters. One of them has to be a letter or a symbol, and one of them has to be a number. And as I mentioned in the notification settings, you do not have to tick this box in order to proceed. This is only if you want to receive their quarterly emails about ORCID features and tips. And once you've set up your password, then the last step is they let you set your global visibility settings, saying who can see everything in your record by default. Everyone can see, only trusted organizations, or only you can see everything in your record. And then of course you'll go in and edit your settings. You can change that item by item as we saw, and agree to their terms of use. And if you've got the I'm not a robot, you get to select the pictures that that reCAPTCHA shows you. I tend to, I don't even remember what I set my default as. I tend to be on the more private side, but whatever you're comfortable with as far as privacy level. Again, you're going to be able, if you're uncomfortable with any of these for particular items, you can change that at the item level. So. And when you hit register, you should now have an ORCID ID. And the last thing I wanted to show you, I'm not going to step you through this. This is just kind of bonus. it's simple enough. You just go to, if you want the Dimensions free account, the URL is in the chat, and you just click the register button, set up that account. And that is so that you can see the add to ORCID buttons in your Dimensions search. You have to have that free account, and you need to be signed into that account in order to see this information. If you're not logged into your Dimensions account and you do a Dimensions search, when you see your records, even when you're signed in, when you're not signed in. So I did the search, I searched me, I'm in Dimensions, I am not logged in. So I pull up my 40 records, but there's no add to ORCID button or already in my ORCID notification. To see those, you need to have that free account and be logged in. So any questions? Has anybody actually followed along? Have you gotten stuck anywhere? Do I need to go back and show you any of the slides, talk through things? And would anyone like, if you've set up your account, would you like to see the account settings slides as a reminder of where you go in and can set up your email notifications? Set your language preferences. Once you've got the ORCID, you just next to your name, the little arrow, and select account settings and go in and edit any of these that you choose. So any questions, anything I can help anyone with? Hopefully you were able to follow along and it's been a straightforward process for you. But I am happy to stick around and answer any questions if you run into any problems.
Terry, I have a question.
Yeah.
If when I'm setting up ORCID account and when I'm using it, are there resources or technical support you can seek from the whoever is facilitating the ORCID?
Yes, ORCID along the way, you've got this, like from the very first link, you've got the help button down here. That would be the place to go. And like I say, it does tend to be fairly straightforward.
While we're waiting for questions, I have another one.
Okay.
I read somewhere that ORCID is like a digital curriculum vitae. And I believe I said that when I was introducing the session. So does that, is there anywhere in ORCID where whatever I have entered or tied to this account to show my publications can be downloaded in a form of CV to submit when I am applying for jobs.
I actually have never done that. I do know there is in account settings, there's this download all my data, but I haven't done that myself. So I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that just creates a PDF of your record. What I see people do frequently is they just include, once you've got your ORCID ID, you can include, this will be a live link. So you just include that link. So you can include that in your CV. Many people actually include that in their email signature line. They include their ORCID ID link. So that's an easy way. And then people are only seeing, when they click on that link, they're only seeing the things that you set to be viewed by the public. So that would be, my suggestion would be make use of that link.
Both in the emails and the CV or resume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Do we have any other questions? If we do not, we will then wrap up this webinar. We thank everybody for coming to this webinar and trying to set up an ORCID account as Terry was walking through different steps. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to Livestock Lab email, and we'll see how we can help.
Nargisa, I have a lot of people on Burkina Faso.
Okay, yeah, Isidore, please.
But the English is very limit our well understanding. I think that there are more 10 people now to participate. Maybe this is about it. Some of the people don't ask question about, they have to learn by reading the PowerPoint. Maybe it will be very best for us, because the English not very or strength here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nanda. We do see that we have quite a lot of participants from West Africa, and we applaud your efforts. Thank you for this. We have translated the slides into French and posted that, posted those, shared those. Those are also available on our web page. So please consult those slides and follow the guidelines out there. Yeah, if you will have questions, please send them either to me or to Livestock Labs, and we will try to assist in a way we can.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup et bonne journée. Bonne journée.
And I would like to conclude this webinar. Once again, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Terry, thank you very much for a very interesting webinar and walking us through the process of setting up ORCID account. My colleagues, Jim Harper and Anna Ugalde, and we will see you on April 29th. Bye now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.